Hello, Internet. I'm Jackie Fox. Welcome to the Greens. Welcome to Empire, whoever else happens to be listening to this. You're really in for a treat, potentially, if you like World of Content, because this is going to be a video that I've wanted to make for going on 2 years now. It's been about, I want to say, 22 months since I first came up with this idea. It was a long idea. It was kind of rambling. I didn't know exactly how to put it into words. But over the last 2 years, no one has made this video that has been in the back of my head. And it's not about a new character. It's not about a new vision card or a combo or something that's broken. It's about the basic state of the game and the basic cycles that Gumi games go through. Patterns that extend out into other Gumi products. From my experience from Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, that was what led me to the understanding that I had a couple years ago. And then the EX meta happened in War of the Visions, and it pretty much confirmed all of my predictions and suspicions. So since I was dead on the money with that, and since we have the foresight of 4 months into the future with JP, I am going to make the same predictions that I made then, only I'm actually going to do it publicly this time. And what we're talking about here is the economics of the game. Talking about currencies within the game and their relative value before and after a level cap change. And when I say currencies and when I say economics, I'm not actually talking about real world dollars that you may have earned at your job or whatever, and put into the money, or the profits that Gumi is taking out of this. I'm looking at this more from a value neutral standpoint, but also I'm not really talking about real money that you can hold in your hand. When I'm talking about economics and currencies, I mean the items in the game. We don't often think about currency outside of like, well, Visior is a currency because you can spend money to buy it. And Gil is a currency because it's like in-world gold, and, you know, basic fantasy lore is that everybody trades gold for stuff, which has some weird libertarian connotations. Oh man, that's a weird intersection. So before this turns into a libertarian fantasy video, realize that there are a lot, like a mind-boggling number of actual currencies within this game that make up a very complicated economic web that is overall the economics of the game. And a lot of these things operate independently of Visior or Gil, or somehow related to one of those things, or it's complicated. One example, I think one of the best examples of what I'm going to be talking about in general in this video, that some people who have been playing the game for a couple of years probably remember, is the changeover into the EX meta. And if you weren't playing at that time, then just take my word for it, or ask some players that have been playing a little bit longer than you to confirm some of this stuff. But before that change, it was so fucking hard to get a level 99 unit. You almost had to pull units on banner, which meant that basically only the people who had the viz to spend the moment the character came out could reasonably expect to be able to build it at all. Because as hard as it is to imagine, you couldn't get shards from the barracks. You could only get JP from the barracks. And hard quests, or as we like to call them, shard quests, didn't exist. Soul stars weren't a thing. You couldn't trade for mind spears because mind spears didn't exist. There just weren't any extra ways to get character shards other than pulling their unit, or whimsy shopping, or being lucky enough to catch 5 or 10 of their units in the shop. And considering that you needed 600 units, which would be pulling 15 copies of the character, or, let's see... Ooh, big numbers. Doing 120, finding their shards. I'm sorry, you have to pull the first character. It's 16 copies of the character. Or you could pull 1 copy of the character to get the unit, and then 120 5 shard for 250 viz pulls from the shop. There were, like, again, as I alluded to, banners, challenge boards that coincided with the banners. They weren't as generous as the challenge boards are now. I think we had more limited time on them. Recurring challenge boards weren't a thing. Those have only been a thing for a couple of units, though, the global exclusives. If you wanted to buy double cost unit shards, they actually had double cost. That's why we call them 100 cost now, not double cost, but it used to be to buy 500 cost shards was 500 Visior. So everything that I just said about 99ing a unit was so much incredibly harder and more expensive because, for one, because of the drop rate, you weren't going to be pulling very many copies of 100 cost units. So you really had to Visior shop for them, which is a huge draw on your Visior even beyond being able to summon with it. So it was really hard to save any Visior to summon as a free-to-play because you still had to build your units and there was no other way of doing it. And I get into all of that QOL because, holy shit, after the EX meta came in, we started getting all sorts, like, what we think of as slow building a character right now was not in any way really possible prior to the EX meta coming in. And a lot of these changes came within maybe the month before to a couple of months after. Although, and this is something I predicted and something that I predict will happen again as we in Global get really close to Reincarnation, but a lot of the materials, like I think probably blossoms, broadstones, maybe branded tablets, stuff like that, elemental statues, those are going to go on sale for Viz at what is going to look like really good prices, but when you consider what those currencies are going to be worth within the in-game economy in only a few months, you probably should save your Viz. Unless you're really bottlenecked by those specific items, you should probably save your Viz for after Reincarnation, maybe even well after. And the reason for this, and you got to understand, like, the way Gumi designs a game to be profitable, okay? So basically, they want you to be able to, with minimal effort, really just showing up, they want you to be able to get maybe 60% of the way to having a unit done. That's why the earlier limit breaks are really easy to do. They don't take many shards. They want a more dedicated player to maybe get 80-some% of the way. So back in the 99 meta, that was getting a character to 89 and then slow grinding those last 200 shards, which is another 5 pulls of the unit, or hitting that shop another 40 times. Maybe 20 if you get all 10 shard pulls. And again, just consider that a 10 shard pull for a 100 cost unit would be 1,000 Visior. That last 200 character shards was so hard to get that it was essentially kind of, you got it because you were a whale, or you did it really fucking slow and patiently. So when the EX meta came around, all of a sudden you've got all sorts of new items, new bottlenecks, and they can kind of ease up the restrictions on the previous bottlenecks. I remember the most pain in the ass item, actually, it was Rainbow Fragments of Thought. And pretty much since like a month or two after the EX meta, I have never, ever wanted for those. In part because they introduced the other Fragments of Thought at lower rarities that could replace them, which really was the thing that really fixed the system and made it more economically viable to where it was previously a roadblock. But also more quests started giving them away as well, so it became really easy to get those. And then Intern Kun fucking up recently has given us a lot of the rainbow orbs as well. Otherwise, those would probably still be a little bit of a bottleneck. But basically, all of the previous bottleneck items, most importantly the character shards, became so much easier to get. And you only need like 400 more character shards to 120 a unit. So it's not even as many as you needed to 99 it. I mean, they could have made it like 1,000 more. If you kind of follow the limit break curve, it should be like, maybe 400 to get to 107, and then another 600 to get to 115, and then maybe another 1,000. I'm very glad they didn't keep with that and actually instead made the character shards an easier part to get and gave us mechanisms for slow grinding. But also, older players have been playing this game for 2 years or so that remember when that came out, that pulled some of the first EX units, probably also remember that you had, like, in that first month, 2 Broadstones if you didn't pay for anything of the UR variety. So you couldn't even EX a full set of 3 units, I believe, in that first month without maybe buying a Broadstone. Now, within a month or two, even more casual players that maybe didn't get every Broadstone that was potentially available that the previous month, they're just not playing that hard. Maybe it took them like 3 months to get the full EX UR team. And in that 3 months, though, those Broadstones were kind of rare to get. Blossoms have been pretty scarce throughout, but they were really scarce at the beginning. Like, holy shit, it was a meme how badly we needed Blossoms and how, shut up and take my viz we were about any time they were offering Blossoms. Just get them, you need them bad. But, like, I don't think I have gone below 15 Blossoms on any account, and I'm not, like, leveling up every MR unit I have, but I mean, unless your name is Corel, Varush, or Velric, or Eileen, or what's another unit that I never level up? It used to be Raldor, but I hear he's getting cool in the future, so I've actually started leveling my Raldors. Pretty much those units. If you're a UR, I'm going to level you up unless you're one of them. And I also do select quest stuff. I'm pretty much at level 10 on all of those. I haven't done like the newer levels to get the weapons and everything. I just did enough that I could start grinding for prisms, which didn't used to be a thing. Now you can grind for like 100 prisms and 50 fragments per month per element, which is, again, just another way of breaking down what were previously bottlenecks by flooding the market and making all of those previous awakening items basically economically very cheap, very easy for us to get in a high supply as opposed to being very highly in demand and being in low supply. But as we move into the Reincarnation system, while Gumi's probably going to figure out even newer ways to hand us more Blossoms, Broadstones, all of the like, we're going to have, especially the horns and the scrolls seem like they're going to be because Mind Spears with the trades, like, oh my god, if you have been grinding the rainbow medals or whatever they're called, by trading your guild medals for the, I think 30 shards a day you can get, you probably have, like, I have like 1,000 Mind Spheres for some of these free units. Those are going to trade 2 to 1, so I could trade like my cache of Zisa Mind Spheres for 500 Mind Spheres. That's going to be awesome. Like, how Mind Spheres used to bottleneck you? Well, actually, I'm not sure if you can use the universal ones before the Reincarnation system, but they're not going to be a bottleneck really in that, even for limited units, because these work for limited units, which is pretty nuts. But again, the horns, but very, very especially, and the one part that I think is kind of an unknown that we're going to have to wait and see is the scrolls. Because I don't think we've really had a system where the bottleneck item has been so necessary and in such quantities. Like, I think you need 6 Blossoms to fully 120 a character. And considering that each Blossom is hard to get, that seems like a lot, but it's been very manageable after they have devalued it within the economy to where, people aren't regularly spending 2,000 viz for a Blossom or whatever. Or just doing 9 steps just so they get Blossoms or stuff like that. After they do that and make it really easy for you to get to 120, maybe even see some new ways to get shards coming, they're going to start introducing more and more ways to get horns and scrolls. And in their first month, as a part of the first month's updates, they've already started to introduce some of these. Umbra has a video going over some of the ones that you can get in the Mog shop that I will probably edit into this.
And that's going to lead us into talking about resources and horns, because as it turns out, there still isn't that many ways on JP to get horns. The new addition this month to JP is the introduction of these medals, monthly medals that you can exchange for shards. And on global, you can do vision cards, but on JP, you fucking can't because they hate us. I really am starting to feel a certain level of disdain. Also interesting is that there are no horns, scrolls, or anything that is available through this actual thing. So yeah, for most part, JP has gotten horribly screwed on this, as it's given us just something that you actually can't stock anymore and just keep for when you need it, and has put an expiration date on this. So thanks, Gumi. I give you a middle finger, but I don't have an actual camera right now. So you guys are just going to have to imagine that. As for other things to do with shops and whatnot, Friend Unit has gotten the addition of SSR scrolls, and not only that, but also regular scrolls for SR, but nothing for UR, and the cost of these is, well, exorbitant would be an understatement. 5k of these friend points. I don't know how many friend points they think we get every month, but it's nowhere near enough to remotely do the cost of this. I mean, I've basically been at 40,000 for months upon end, spending some towards flowers and whatnot. But this is crap. This is garbage. This is way too expensive, and I fucking hate this. To the producers and executives who decided on this, a Merry Christmas to you. I hope you rot in hell, because this is absolutely like just a joke. The guild medals is slightly more reasonable, but again, just everything about this makes me hate this so terribly much. These aren't really that expensive, so these aren't even worth considering. These ones are the ones that are kind of worth considering, but the cost, I mean, if you were looking at this, like, it's just 25,000, which is a quarter of my current saved up. I just hate this. Thanks, I hate it, is my overall thing here. Into the actual UR medals, we do have a couple of new additions. As you can see, for like the vision cards, nothing has changed here, so there isn't really too much to talk about here. But here there are finally sources of potential horns and another opportunity for scrolls, which would be okay overall. But here's the thing. 500 is pretty expensive for these. Again, I guess they only care about whales at this point. But, you know, most mid-tier to lower-tier players use these basically for trying to boost up characters through this, and the fact that you still need to use this for Reincarnation.
Okay, before I get into the bigger editor's note here, I do want to point out that while 500 of this currency for a UR horn is ridiculous, that is exactly the same price that Blossoms currently are in the store. And I think, as I've demonstrated throughout this video, Blossoms are not very valuable. And I think that this was the first way that we were given within the EX meta to get Blossoms on like a regular basis. So this was also by far, I mean, just look through the video at all the other ways you can get Blossoms, by far the most expensive way in one of the most expensive resources to get them. So I actually think that, you know, this is a sign that, again, it's going to be a little bad at first, and then we're going to get some of these other ways. And I would expect that the UR horns, maybe, since they're costing them this way from the beginning, that they may be somehow equivalent to kind of the treatment that Blossoms have gotten, which is something I talk about all throughout the video. But bigger editor's note now. Editor Jackie here. Actually, rewatching Umbra's video, I noticed something that I noticed when I was watching the video also, that's kind of an example of what I'm talking about here. He talks about how they just introduced a monthly medal system, which I think we got in global first, and ours, as he notes in the video, we can summon vision card shards, which is by far the most Chad way to spend those medals. Absolutely. But this is just another one of those ways that we have been given recently to gain a new Blossom of Paradise per month. So it's an example of that recently, but also looking at this screenshot of global, and this shot from JP, you can see that their Rainbow Vision spheres are actually half price. Another thing that I noticed in watching this video is that, so he's talking about the friend metal shop, and let me show you what okay. Their friend metal shop is very different than ours. Okay, for one thing, I have either mentioned or will mention that, prisms used to be 250 metals per prism, and then they dropped them down to 20. Well, it looks like JP has them for 10, so that's probably going to go down in the future. We should look out for the Rainbow Fragment of Thought if he scrolls to it, because it's 2,000 for us, and I very much imagine that it's cheaper for them. But the thing that I think is interesting is in the Guild Metal Shop, 5,000 for a Blossom of Paradise, which is the same price that they're getting in the Friend Metal Shop. Friend Metals are a lot harder to get, by the way, I would say. Even if you're in a low tier guild, you probably still get way more guild medals. It's still 2,000 for a Rainbow Fragment of Thought, so that hasn't come down yet for JP. But this is kind of what I'm talking about. Initially, these options weren't available for horns or for scrolls after the Reincarnation system. It's been maybe a month before this stuff started showing up. And yes, it's overpriced, and yes, it is weird that they would expect you to have that many friend medals to just spend like that, because man, that's saving a lot of friend medals. That being said, I regularly save, but it's only one Reincarnation too. That's the other thing, is that for something to be this rare, you need a lot more than just, say with a Blossom of Paradise. You need a lot more than 6 of them to really get the max out of these things. Oh no, their Broadstones are the same price too. Okay. But again, that hasn't been a problem in a long time, so that may be one of the currencies that they don't mess with as much. But I do find it interesting. Let's see. So these are also in the Guild Metal Shop at the same price. I think that's much more the reasonable place to buy them. I guess it is good that you can buy them in both places. Although, this is my other complaint, I would say that the UR scrolls are probably equivalent to a Blossom in theory. So the UR scrolls should be 5,000 of these, not the MR. The UR stuff seems it all seems really overcosted, and I do agree with Umber on that. And maybe they're testing the waters, maybe these prices come down. I mean, again, they're sitting next to 10 cost prisms. Currently we have 20 cost prisms, and earlier this year we had 250 cost prisms. I'm just saying that, after the kind of new car smell wears off of things like these scrolls and these horns, they might price them a little bit more reasonably. But even the progress that can be seen in just a few screenshots of this video essentially shows exactly what I'm talking about how bringing in a new currency to maximize a character basically forces them to devalue all of the other currencies that you need to level up a character. Because really, their economics, in terms of the money that they actually pull out, now I'm actually talking about real cash money, their economics come from having 1 or 2 of these things which you buy, in addition to Vizzy or to spend on characters. Like, if you had to spend all the way down the line, that would just be fucked, and I don't think the whales would tolerate that. Again, it's a game of give and take, and, I don't think that we are in quite the place that like Magic the Gathering is. I mean, I guess if Gumi or Alim get balled out in a big corporate merger, then we need to start looking out for the way that this game could change rapidly overnight, the same way that Magic the Gathering has. And I'm not going to get into that, but fucking Google it, because like all of the Magic channels are talking about the bullshit that's been going on, the cash grabs within Magic, even the ones that try to remain kind of apolitical and value neutral about these things are pissed off right now. And this isn't a case of that. But, again, if they get balled in a merger, maybe we should start to worry. But my point is that we should look at the history of how Gumi has handled these transitions in trying to imagine how they're going to handle this one. But anyways, I've just explained the whole video in a nutshell, so let me get back to the thing. But this is likely the first step. I mean, we're in month 1. Usually, I think Gumi likes, when they introduce a new level cap, they introduce a window of time in which early adopters can get a jump on the rest of the meta, and early adopters typically are whales, because they have the money to fully adopt this new reincarnation system and get the most out of it immediately. But, I mean, again, I think it's going to depend on almost purely on the economics of UR scrolls and how easy those become to get and how cheap and available they become. The supply and demand issue there is really going to be the make or break for is reincarnation super whale friendly. But I think that, you know, all of these systems kind of suck for free-to-plays for the first 3 months as they're new, and then once that new car smell wears off, all of a sudden we're getting discounts on all of the awakening items, and I'm not saying that like a casual player is going to get enough of these to thrive, but if you get all of the ones that are available for free each month, you should be able to be relatively fine within 3 months. Maybe have some of the first reincarnation characters maxed by then, maybe. And at the point that you have, even if they're the weakest reincarnation characters or the earliest reincarnation characters, if you have 3 of them, you're way closer to the top of the power curve than if you had 3 maxed 120 units. The difference between people who only have 140 that isn't like stat maxed versus a whale who has pretty much gotten 3 units more or less all the way through the system is going to be huge. But once people have at least 3 units, you know, whatever 3 units they could afford to take all the way, then those power differentials are going to be a lot lower. So I think that this is definitely a system that is showing potential to be more whale-friendly than anything that Gumi has done in my memory. But at the same time, these systems always feel really bad for the free-to-play players at the very beginning. At least when it comes to competitive PvP, which, let's be honest, is really the driver of the keeping up the Joneses and FOMO mindset that really drive a lot of players to actually spend hard-earned money in this game, other than the fact that farming is hard. Although, again, farming's gotten, much like gaining character shards, going back to the days of farming hard quest difficulty weapons is... I'm doing the rune bow +6 right now, and I'd never farmed for it before, and God, I'll post a picture of some of my horrible background repeat luck, but like this is just fucking miserable. I forgot how bad it was previously. So I guess the point that I'm making here is that while it is definitely going to create at least a brief meta, for sure, where whales will be even more dominant, especially in very high-level PvP, it'll balance out eventually, and the economics of how much money or effort you have to put into the game to do reasonably well will level out probably in 3 months as it becomes very easy to get to 120, because that probably represents like the new 80% of the way to maximum power that they want even a more casual player to be able to reach. And they're going to make that 140 kind of where more competitive free-to-play players can easily reach with 3 characters relatively quickly. And, you know, that new kind of whale territory is going to be like fully maxing the stats of a reincarnation character. Kind of like having fully maxed passives on your trust stones is now, even though I've done that as a free-to-play by now. And I've got like 6 or 7 of them like that too. It really just was a system where you had to do a little bit every day and just, you know, keep the snowball rolling, essentially. And I think the Reincarnation is going to be a lot like that. But again, I think that the biggest thing to watch for the economics of the game in terms of, is it pushing for more of, I don't want to say like income inequality, but like play inequality based on one's income and how much of their income they're willing to put into the game. Play to win inequality, I guess. is really going to hinge on those scrolls. I can see them making the horns a lot more available again, so that more competitive players, maybe like introducing a way that you can get 1 or 2 per month, maybe kind of the same way that you can get blossoms in the elemental Alchrist quests. You can get like 1 per month out of that. Maybe we'll see a horn, something like that, or something easier, a little bit more reasonably costed. Or maybe we'll just see a cost update to where the ones that are available now that I've previously included a clip of Umbra complaining about are at a again recosted to a much more acceptable cost. Much like how the prisms and fragments of thought in the Mog shop used to be like 250 medals to get, now they're 20. I mean, that's huge. That is a huge difference. Do I think that they're going to go quite that low with this? No, because it is the new premium item. This video was never going to be short because there's just so much to say about all that stuff and about the quality of the game in general. But all of that being said, while I think that there's probably going to be kind of a rough patch and definitely a morale rough patch that guild leaders especially should be watching out for, I think we will persevere. And for those of us who are kind of using this opportunity to plan and get ready for the units that we want to reincarnate and kind of build our wish list. I mean, JP always has to play these things by the seat of the pants, but we have 4 months in advance. I mean, you look, at 4 months warning, when you find out about a character getting reincarnation on JP, if you have it at 120, you can throw it in the barracks and have probably as many mind spheres as you could possibly want to reincarnate them by the time their reincarnation actually comes out. So the power of foresight is amazing when it comes to this system. Just keep an eye on who's getting reincarnated in JP and put those units, if you actually want them, in the barracks right away. And just keep in mind that you might only get 1 or 2 horns per month as a free-to-play player, at least for the first maybe 3 months. So just kind of think about it that way and think about it as like, okay, here's a list of maybe 50 characters that get reincarnated within the first 3 months. I'm picking 6 of these guys and I am going to commit to them. Or maybe even less than that, save some of the horns for future. Like, you really only need 3 units for PvP, so maybe you could pick a 3-unit team. I don't know. But what I do encourage is think about these decisions, because even if you aren't investing money, your time is very valuable too. So think about the way that you're investing time in this game and, have a thoughtful strategy for it instead of just wasting your time going for things that aren't necessarily going to help you and that are going to really spread your resources too thin overall. Really, I think having a concentrated approach and a plan for how you're going to deploy your resources over the next couple of months as a global player, that's the great advantage that we have over JP. So hopefully when this comes around for us, it won't be nearly as painful because we will have had foresight, and also people like Umber Rays and Cabbage will have complained about the system enough to get Gumi to notice and give Global a slightly better time of it at their second time around, running through the introduction to the Reincarnation system. Yep. Nothing more to say about that, so peace, y'all.